Where is that image?
If I have a sales guy cover, I will say sales guy, can you just qualify? And he will say no.
Correct.
And that's where the stress starts. They say,
Right. Good evening, everyone. It's great to have all of you here.
Good evening.
And to talk about today's panel discussion, we have with us Huzefa Motiwala, Director Systems Engineering, Palo Alto Networks, and he covers India and SAARC region. Then we have Parakum Pathirana, CISO LLC Holdings, co-founder IPA Sri Lanka, and of course he wears multiple hats. And of course, last but not the least, Arjuna Jayasinghe Group CIO, Midas Safety. So the topic for the day is transforming business with zero trust, real world tactics and strategies with AI and ML. The reason why we wanted to talk about this, we've been hearing a lot on credential theft, lateral movement, and other cyber attack tricks have foiled perimeter security again and again. We know that the old philosophy of trusting everything and everyone inside a network is no longer sound. The zero trust model, trust nothing, verify everything, is the proposed answer to this problem. But it is easier said than done in real enterprises. At this panel discussion, we will look at zero trust, what it really looks like in practice, how to overcome the challenges along the way, what security benefits you will realize right away in the short term, in the long term, and how your organization can take the first steps towards implementing a zero trust model. So I'd like to bring in Huzefa to start proceedings. The zero trust, and sometimes people ask me, is it a buzzword? Is it a marketing gimmick? You know, what is it, right? So I'd like to hear from you, if you can set the context so that we can take the discussion forward from here on. What in your mind is zero trust?
Yeah, I think great question to start with. Sujit, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Yes.
Awesome. Let me take a step back and tell you how, I hope everyone is doing well. And thank you for taking out time and joining in this webinar. It takes a lot of time to kind of balance out work, your day-to-day life, and especially what's happening there. And we are all together and coming and kind of listening this. And I'm sure we'll make it worthwhile, the kind of takeaways that you have from here. So back to your question, I think what you asked in terms of zero trust and where do you kind of, how do you put sense or context to that? Let me take a step back and say, what's happened around the world, if you see is, there are, the entire thing around digitization and digital transformation, which has kind of pushed a lot of different, I would say, architectures or ways of looking and running at your businesses on one hand. And on the other hand, there's this entire thing around the network transformation, which is kind of led to the hybrid work perspective, right? So there are two sort of, I would say, tailwinds or huge transformation projects which the world went through. But on the back of it, what happened was a lot of different threat vectors started coming in, and we have seen very, very different scenarios of how ransomware has taken off in the last few years, going from a single vector strategy of coming in and kind of trying to encrypt everything to kind of not limiting to encryption, but kind of going into targeting the infrastructure, targeting the data, or exfiltrating the data. And now we are seeing that a lot of these attacks are bringing in the fourth perspective, which is cryptojacking, right, or crypto mining sort of coming in. So with this state landscape, with the perimeter no longer being there, I find it very, very funny that when people start talking about zero trust and you look up and Google zero trust, you'll get 1,000 different definitions coming up in terms of what zero trust is. But we all need to kind of understand that this whole zero trust thing is not something which has suddenly become a buzzword and we need to do it. Every time the security industry faced a use case, let's say, can I trust this connection, or any use case or any question came up about trust, it came up with a solution just to address that. So, if you have to trust a connection, here's a firewall which can help you decide whether to trust or not trust. Can I trust that file which just showed up at the endpoint? Here's antivirus. Can I trust that user? Here's two-factor authentication. Later on in the mid-90s when internet came in, can I trust the content of that connection? Well, here's IDS, IPS. So necessarily what I'm trying to tell you is this happened like a patchwork of stuff. Every time a trust question came in, here's something which came in as a solution to kind of stuff. Now, if you have to ask me and say, how do I define zero trust and why now? I think the reason is, since the threat vector and the attack surface has gone all over the place, we need a very, very strategic approach in these times right now to ensure that from a cybersecurity perspective, we have to secure every organization. Every organization needs to look at by eliminating, I would say, implicit trust. Rather than using, saying zero trust, it's about implicit trust. What I mean to say is, if a user ends up sitting in a data center, accessing some workload, we assume certain level of trust because he's sitting in the data center. But the same user walks into a coffee shop and start accessing an application which is on maybe public cloud or something. We assume again that some kind of trust is not supposed to be in place, and we start looking at things very, very differently. So how do we ensure that, if I have to define zero trust, right? How do we ensure that we have a strategic approach by an organization? It eliminates all this implicit trust decisions and continuously validates every stage of a digital interaction, every stage, right from the time wherever the user is to device to whatever application it is touching on. So that, for me, I think is the new definition of zero trust. And why now? Again, as I said, because of the attack vectors that we have seen, and because of the hybrid workforce, and because of the digital transformation of workloads going across multi-cloud, hybrid cloud world, now is the time to kind of look into that framework and put something in place which is helping us validate these decisions across. Make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. It does, Huzefa. There's several things you mentioned. Right? You talked about the cloud adoption, the migration, the hybrid work environment, right? I'm just trying to use different terms of whatever you just said, right? And you also talked about the threat vectors, the attack surface, and you also give examples of data exfiltration, cryptojacking, and so on and so forth. It's a mix of literal English, and some of them are very, very technical. So I'd like to bring Arjuna in, right? You being a CISO, a CIO of a large organization with a global footprint, the board only understands numbers, right? Zeros and ones, dollars, right? How much does it cost? But when you go and tell them, right? Or if you were to take all what Huzefa just mentioned, how would you convince the board, or how would you go about telling them, okay, this is the time we need to look at zero trust? How would you go about it? Arjun?
You are muted.
We moved all our workloads into cloud actually 6-7 years back. We were the pioneers to move some of the SAP workloads, and both because we are operating in multiple countries, multiple time zones we worked, and we support an entire group. Then what biggest challenge was actually during the COVID time, actually how most of our workload, mobile workload, actually working from home and people accessing from different locations. Nearly 70% of our user base, or 70 to 80% sometimes, work from home, and that gives us a big challenge. And then at that point, actually, we went. Then again, there are some instances our global workforces, right? Then most of the people are young guys are coming into the our teams, and there are some of the European countries. Then they have a different work patterns. They were used to have a work from home regularly, and then how do you track the content and how do you do what they are doing? And that was really a challenge we have, because we have a central NOx in the different regions, Sri Lanka one, and then Pakistan one, but other countries actually we had a real challenge. And the pandemic gave us a lot of thing. Actually, everyone want to do the digital transformation journey, fast track and double speed. And then our bodies very much invest on the technology things. And if we go and justify the real reason, they help us, they give us, they invest on us. That is the background. But the other thing is the GDPR and all the things had a lot of things. Our customers demand us, we need to have GDPR compliances, and then how we maintain those things. That's one challenge. And everything, then we want to simplify our infrastructure landscape, right? We have a multiple firewalls, multiple providers we use, and then each and every area there are different tools, and we will need to standardize that one across the thing. And based on those things, actually we managed to convince the board. And then the last part, actually one of our customers and the two of our business partners got compromised, and that also helped a lot, actually, because they know the impact they had, the pain they gone through. And sometimes some of the people, they were unable to access the systems for months. And then that is the reason actually we put all that together and build the business case. Actually, it was challenging, but we are in a cloud environment and all the things. Then they understood the necessity of zero trust and the importance of the cybersecurity.
All right, Arjuna. So you're very lucky. You have a tech-savvy board, right? So I'm just going to, bring Parakum into the conversation, right? Parakum, you and I, have had the opportunity of working for a Big Four and then working with the local organizations, right? And we tend to see both sides of the coin, right? And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not bad, because you're on the spot, you're trying to see all those non-compliance things glaring at us, right? Now, you heard what Arjuna said, right? I mean, it was all about how they went about transforming their business and where they are in terms of today. But he specifically mentioned about, people-related issues, young people, different cultures, different attitudes. But from your perspective, right, what do you see as a challenge? And how do you think those challenges can be solved if a model like zero trust was to be adopted?
Yeah. So Sujit, let me take a step back now. Probably I came across this concept of zero trust or something closer to it probably early 2000. We were, soon after joining with LOLC, so we were looking at buying a perimeter firewall. So back in 2000, people were still, you had your kingdom, you had your perimeter wall, and you were basically trying to protect networks, right? So I remember this. There was this forum, I think, Jericho's forum. So that's a place where I first saw this, I believe the words that he used were losing the perimeter or deperimeterization. So in our case, just to add to what Arjuna said, I believe with this COVID, actually, no brain, it helped us to, adapt our journey faster. But then again, now, you have your mail on cloud, right? You have you have certain offerings from either AWS or GCP. So you are already there. right? When this happened 2.5 years ago. So then the biggest challenge we had as a security team, I mean, okay, we had all this at the same time. Now right now we are operating in about 18 countries. So we support most of the countries from our data center, and some countries where there are data localization laws, they have their own data centers. We had a mobile workforce also, fairly, I wouldn't say large, but maybe about 5%. So, I mean, when this happened, we were already there. So the challenge that we had, okay, now we have, I mean, this percentage has suddenly changed. Like imagine earlier you had 90 to 10, 90 in office and 10 out of office. Now suddenly it changed other way around. Only people who could come to office or who had to come to office were at office. So in the corporate network, rest of them were connecting from pretty much God knows where. So you suddenly had all these challenges. I mean, security teams are scrambling. Okay, how do I see them? And then, I mean, in addition to security, other challenges we have had, like, okay, you have to give them connectivity also, right? So you have your corporate APN dongles, and then again, luckily, about 10 years ago, we made a decision, okay, we'll no longer buy desktops unless otherwise those are really, really critical roles, like maybe somebody like cashier, and rest of it we replaced with laptops. I mean, we had no idea of COVID or working from home. Our decision was purely based on cost savings, on networking, in terms of getting UPS and all that. We did a calculation and we saw, okay, it's much cheaper to buy laptops, and they can also take it home and, I mean, work from home. So this things shifted. Like earlier, asset given to you, you use a cable lock and lock it to your desk, but we moved away from that. We gave the responsibility, okay, you do it and take it home and do your work. So, so the other challenges that I have seen people having, okay, you couldn't get laptops, right? Even now, there's a severe shortage of laptops in the market. Plus, due to chip shortage, again, prices have gone up. Connectivity. So then again, now how we supported users. And suddenly this COVID happened unplanned. So we had to change our service desk, help desk guys. Okay, this is how you should tackle it. But I mean, I think we were compared to many others, we were relatively in a better wicket because of the infrastructure investments we had, both in terms of hardware and the software. We could give connectivity. We already had the means of connectivity. We could provide, I mean, we could connect them securely to the corporate network. We had all that. But we had certain other challenges. I mean, we on the very first day itself, we even managed to run our call center remotely. But there were certain things that we didn't like plan for. For example, imagine somebody calling your call center and you hear baby crying in the background, or some background noises. So we noticed, when you call a professional call center, as a customer, may not want to hear those. So challenges like that also we have had. Security, I mean, I believe we'll just explain later. I mean, what are the challenges we had? We had no means of identifying, rather like in a very granular way, where these users are coming from. They were coming to corporate network. Sometimes, I mean, we had visibility on some parts, but not on all communication channels. So we had to do a lot of, monitoring. So that's how we managed to keep the situation under control.
That's a whole list of challenges, right? And some of them were unplanned. And if I were to add something to what you just said, we thought we had a pandemic and we were getting out of it. And especially for Sri Lanka, we went into a different crisis, right? And people had no way of commuting. Again, forced to stay at home or find alternate ways of getting to work. So I guess the world is also experiencing, I think the different parts of the world are also facing similar pandemic combined with economic constraints, and this is going to evolve. So, and I was also, I mean, I just a little while ago, I did a LinkedIn and a Facebook post. I also was saying, right? While we talk about this great model, right? It started in a Jericho forum. They talked about losing the perimeter, and then it evolved over a period of time. And today we talk about a concept, right? And today, a lot of time people think, okay, is zero trust a product? Some people think it is a product. Some think it is a process. Some think it is a thought process. Some think it is a marketing terminology, right? I mean, that's where we started this discussion, right? So, in our experience, right, having worked in the IT domain for several years, we know how projects can go wrong and how we may not achieve the desired results. And here, when everybody is saying that zero trust is going to be the savior for you, when you lose your perimeter, that becomes the blessing in disguise where you will be saved from all the security threats. Right. So I'd like to bring Huzefa again and talk about here. I mean, I'm going to quote some statistics which Gartner says. Gartner Media Advisory says 60% of the organizations will embrace zero trust. And I think Sri Lankan companies are also talking about zero trust much more than what they probably would have done 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But sometimes when people talk about zero trust, I always say, aren't we talking about least privilege? Need to know, need to do. But trust overrode everything else, right? Implicit trust. But then Gartner is also saying that by 2025, 60% of them will be, adopting zero trust. But then they're also saying half of them is expected to fail to realize the benefits. That's a scary situation, right? Now here we go to the board and say, hey, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, we've got this great concept. We implement and we can actually probably, we could also say that we probably save costs or reduce the threat or probably reduce the insurance premiums. Yep. You're seeing a lot of customers across the region and different markets. Right? So I'd like you to share your experience. What is that people should do not to fail? It's easy to fail. In my mind, it's easy to fail. Go ahead,
Yeah, no, I think Sujit, you hit it on the nail when you said, what is zero trust, and is it a product? Is it a thing? Is it a word? Is it a plain word Superman? It's actually a framework. Zero trust is a framework, and the reason I say this is for all the reasons that we mentioned of what we went through or we are going through in this perimeterless world, in this world where we are adopting. And the gentleman Arjuna and Parakum, they mentioned various examples of how the workloads they adopted cloud, how the mail went into a cloud delivered service. The issue or the thing is, from a customer perspective, it is very important to understand that zero trust is not a single product or a single solution. It is not that I say that if I have to have my hybrid users allow them to connect to my data center or application, so my zero trust network access is the way I would probably go ahead and start. I would say yes, but ZTNA or zero trust network access is nothing but a small subset of that framework, right? The whole framework is that the whole thinking is that you need to figure out who or what your entities are and kind of start putting that implicit trust questions across each interactions in this cycle. So whether the user is sitting anywhere, using whatever device, accessing whatever application, generating whatever data, the infrastructure. Whichever in this cycle, if you start putting this implicit trust questions, you are achieving two outcomes out of this. As you rightly said, if I'm bringing that sort of trust question closer to my crown jewels, the user application infrastructure, right? I am to start with, the biggest benefit is by nature, by itself, I'm becoming a lot more secure in this framework because I'm not implicitly trusting just because that user or that device ended up being in a data center or somewhere else, accessing application maybe in the data center somewhere else. I'm not assuming things and I'm putting that questions there. I'm becoming more secure. But the biggest advantage as an outcome of this is simplicity, right? I'm going to cut down on a lot of these complex, multi-plethora museum of things, trying to solve each use cases, answering this questions around these crown jewels. Simplicity is the biggest outcome, I would say, coming out of that. Now, the reason why people probably fail, and what I've understood, is they're trying to solve this problem not by a framework approach, but by a product approach or by a use case. So I have this use case of this user accessing a SaaS application. Let me try and solve that, trust issue by using CASB. Tomorrow, that user walks into a data center and want to access an application in the data center. Or let me try and solve this by putting VPN or some other set of private network solution. So that kind of starts breaking down that whole zero trust underlying framework or thinking process, and you very soon you realize that you've bitten off more than you chew. And then comes the question of the TCO aspect and the value perspective. So I feel if we break it down into these, understand that this is a foundational framework, treat each of these entities as the crown jewels, and then start questioning this implicit trust questions, and put a very, very strong framework and build on top of that. I think that will help solve a lot of issues.
Excellent thoughts, Huzefa. What I liked is, when you started in your opening remark, you said for every problem, there was a solution. In other words, a product. So what we were building is multiples of building blocks of security products. Right? So we actually, I think in a very fashionable way, we may call it defense in depth, defense in breadth, right? Going by the theoretical way of articulating it. But now we are talking about the simplicity, right? How simple can we make it? Right? Would simplicity by itself become a challenge? Right? I'm just going to stay with you, Huzefa, and I'm going to get you to respond to this. Right? When you say simple, is it simplicity in terms of the technology, the architecture, or are we talking about a simple thought process which can actually simplify the whole risk management framework? Would you like to comment on that, Huzefa?
Yeah, I think simple or simplify things, or simple is a small word, but has a very, very huge impact. I feel any solution, and particularly cybersecurity perspective, I think we should have a very, very simplified way of architecting it. We have a very simplified way of procuring it and getting it consumed, and very, very simplified way of operating it and consuming it with easy to use dashboards, and a very, very simplified way of integrating these various things, because in cybersecurity, the continuums are very, very vast. You have the endpoints, the cloud, the network, the software. How do you ensure that there is very, very simple aspect of integrating it across, so that as a consumer, as a customer, I am not spending cycles and cycles of trying to make things work across these disparate things, moving away from my core, which is my bread and butter business, right? So it should be, so simplicity for me has very, many, I would say, impact and continuums and on very, very different aspects of this.
Thank you for those thoughts. Right, Para, I'm just going to bring you in here. Right? Again, on the same concerns. Defense in depth, defense in breadth, right? And I think that's what traditionally we did. And we had multiple products. But then when we look at the timelines, right? We saw SolarWinds, then we had maybe the various attacks like Target, then the different infrastructure companies which were attacked. Now, what we discovered in all that is that there was an issue in the implementation, and all of them were pointing to a particular product. And the product had failed. There was no silver bullet in spite of you having all the Gartner quadrant leading products deployed in your environment. Now, again, right? I mean, you have played multiple roles, and currently also you play multiple roles, right? On one hand, you play a CISO role. On the other hand, you are also a founder of the product. Now, how would you, or what would you say to the people who are here in this session today, listening to us, or those people who are going to be listening to the recordings later on? What should they be doing to implement a zero trust framework, right? If I were to simplify that question, is there one size which fits all? Parakum?
Yeah, I think that's a more difficult question than who's going to be the Sri Lankan president. So definitely, I mean, I don't see a silver bullet, right? It's depends on probably the industry you are in. Like if you're from a startup, you are constrained for your capital expenditure, your investments and all that. But more than that, I would say it depends on now how you operate, how your business operate. Are you running in, whether you are running in multiple places? I mean, it's like, Sujit, I think now say sometimes I have seen like people go for blockchain-based solutions for everything. But the question is it really feasible, right? So probably I still believe in this, what panelists said about this KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. So if we can keep it simple, that's the best way to secure it. For example, I mean, if you're running, your organization is running on multiple workloads, multiple countries, mobile workforce, and if you have allowed them to, bring your own device, and if they are connecting from their mobile phones and all that, even without your knowledge, you are already in it. So you just need to figure out, how you go ahead and implement necessary controls. So, I mean, few principles in terms of zero trust I have seen is like whenever you give or whenever you authenticate a resource, you just need to make sure that it's just in time, not a prolonged period or anything. And then again, these other two principles that Sujit you mentioned on the least privileged and what's the other one? So least privileged. The third one, probably you need to monitor always whatever happening, right? Whatever after you implementing it, your resources, your technical infrastructure, you need to keep monitoring. And again, the next one would be like now earlier we thought like, I'm referring to early 2000, we thought, okay, inside a corporate, we were worried about the corporate network. But now with this new paradigm, like, it's there are no boundaries, whether it's your corporate network or outside network. I mean, earlier I have seen during my Big 4 days, people were really worried about outside communications, but inside you were okay with clear text. But with this, you can't really, it doesn't matter inside or outside. You need to secure the network. And the fourth, or rather the fifth principle would be like, the core of the zero trust, like, always, never trust, but always verify. But then again, if you take like few years back, these are, I understand people are using them as buzzwords to sell products and services, but conceptually, if we understand why these were there, when internet first came in during ARPANET days, only the military or academics were there. So there was implicit trust. People will not go and con somebody, and you didn't have those issues. But then again, with the commercialization after opening it, now you don't know who's you're talking to. So I believe with that context, this zero trust plays a very pivotal role to bring back the concept of trust to the organization.
That's a very interesting note. Bring the trust back to the organization, right? So while we talk about zero trust, we need to find ways to trust certain things, right? So by doing various other things, like you ran through a list of things, right? One of them being always verify, right? So I'm just going to shift focus to Arjuna. Arjuna, you heard both Huzefa and Parakum talk about a lot of things, right? I want you to take a step back and tell the people here, if they were to, like, if all these people in this forum are going to be part of your team, and if you were to roll out a zero trust framework, and if I were to use the word strategic roadmap, how would you go about it? Arjuna?
Yeah, Sujit, I think I like that one, bring back trust to the organization. I think that is the starting point. Sujit, in my case, what we identified is actually most important thing is the culture. Right? If you are bringing, and I try to now my team, I told them to understand the concept and try to implement rather than bringing different consultant, different people, because we have a certain number of tools available, right? 5 pillars, even a identity, whatever the existing tool, what we can do something, and then after that, every scenario, if we can go through brainstorm with them, actually internally IT teams, actually I was part of that, and I learned first actually how we want to drive this change. This is a serious change actually. When I was doing the first session to some of the senior management team, including the CEO and the team, actually they were really upset. Some part of the countries we are working, zero trust means the employees may feel like we are not trusting them, and like that, right? That's another side of the thing, right? The word, right? It's zero trust. We are implementing a zero trust thing. They may think, okay, people may think this way, why don't you change the word like that? Don't mention the zero trust, explain it differently. We have to be very practical. We have to understand where we operate and which countries, because different cultures and everything, that's very different. Even in Sri Lanka, sometimes we can tell someone, okay, this is what you are going to do, and some places we cannot do. I think the first step is you assess your culture, organization culture, not the country, and then you know where you want to go with the zero trust. And then that means we are not saying we are not trusting you, but each and every transaction we are checking, because of your safety. And then we started campaign, right? We are doing protecting our data and your personal data as well, and bring the importance of the zero trust to their life also, the social identity, and then how we going to protect. And that is, I think, the important part, is understand them, they educate the people. Then actually the implementing the zero trust 5 pillars, there are enough material available how to do, and then time frame, there are ways to man. But before we put a strategic roadmap, I educate from the board to even our user level, and the team is fully understand what they are doing. Because then when it comes, and now the entire IT teams talk one language when it comes to zero trust. When it comes to the exception, they talk one language. It's very easy for us to manage the entire chain. And then other one is the measurement. Actually, we need to put up some sort of a measurements on the table each and every time, how we can simplify. That simplification means number of help desk tickets should come down, right? Number of password reset, that type of categories should come down drastically. We have this thing. And then how quickly we can enable the business requirement. If there's a business requirements are coming, because we are a manufacturing, that we are not in any ITI or any products thing, but if we see that type of thing, how quickly we can enable the business requirement, right? And how we can give them whatever they are required within this framework. I think that is one measure. And the other one is the security effectiveness, right? After we implement this one, how effective security, what are the areas we can improve? And then the entire, the monitoring part, Parakum talked about the entire security posture, how we can monitor after implementing. That is one of the end game of the zero trust, right? Then after that, monitoring, the real-time monitoring, how we can bring these AI and ML tools, how we can aware and reduce the number of monitoring team size. Those are the ultimate objectives. I think that when you are coming to the roadmap, initially you assess your culture, organizational culture, and what type of people you have, and then put like a ERP, you know, when you're doing ERP implementation, we do a project and name it, and it's a big thing, right? I think zero trust, if you give that type of a flavor to the zero trust adaptation also, then it's a number one priority of the organization, right? We're becoming like ERP. I think we bring that type of a thing into the table, and that importance. I think then you can plan your thing with your team, right? What are the first quarter and like that, and go to the roadmap. I hope I answer your question.
Yeah, you did. And there are quite a few things, right? And I'm just going to pick a few things which you mentioned, right? And I just want to circle back to Parakum and then to Huzefa to get their thoughts on some of the things you mentioned, right? You specifically, repeatedly, you talked about two things. One, in terms of the culture. The other one, you spoke about the language. I always say that English is a very funny language. Right? And what you say may be misunderstood or understood differently. Right? I mean, this is something I heard when I was with KPMG New Zealand, and then somebody was telling me that they had asked the person who was actually working for them to skin the chicken and put him in the freezer. So this guy comes back from work and asks, okay, have you done it? And he says, yes, it's in the fridge. And then this guy opens and there's this chicken without the feathers shivering in cold, right? So what he meant and what this guy understood are two different things. So I think that having that communication and setting that standard of communication and the definitions of the words are very, very important, right? So, you would have heard, I mean, we spoke a lot on least privilege, continuously verify, but one of the other things which people always talk about when they talk about zero trust is assume breach. Now, I find it a little funny. You put all the defenses, you conduct awareness, you go and certify yourself with the best of standards, ISO 27000, SOC, whatever, and still for all, assume breach. Doesn't it sound a little weird? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, let me start with this. Like you say, only the paranoid survives, right? So, I mean, the way I look at it is like the best argument I would say, Sujit, for this comment, like you remember this US, how their data was breached. This guy taking critical military data on a CD just labeled Lady Gaga audio CD. So imagine if these guys who were on the security checkpoint, if they really checked it, right, they would have believed, okay, just an audio CD. So I believe, like, irrespective of whatever controls you put, it's always better to get a independent opinion, like the same reason why we do red teaming and all that. So to get an additional comfort. So those are my thoughts, Sujit. So I mean, it's basically, you plan for the, but you prepare for the worst. And if it, I mean, we are basically, from a security point of view, we are trying to reduce the MTD so you can respond faster. For me, it makes sense. I mean, that's what now generic question, and I used to get earlier, like in the security investments, if we do this, can I, are you trying to sleep peacefully? I mean, getting everything, I mean, do you really need this? If you have this, like, does it mean you don't have to worry? I mean, I always say no, it's just we are adding another layer, right? So we are only trying to see or rather make it difficult for somebody to come in, and then we have to assume that they are already in. If they are already in, how soon we can detect? So that's it, Sujit.
Yeah, sure thing. No, I mean, good observations, Parakum. I mean, I'm just going to go to Huzefa, right? Two things. Based on what Parakum said and what Arjuna said. Arjuna said we need to reduce the number of tickets. Right. Parakum is saying we need to have that cushion. Now, how quickly can we find, if we are paranoid, we can be paranoid, right? We can be assuming. So can we mobilize the whole army out there and start getting them to go look for that needle in the haystack? Arjuna also mentioned about use of AI ML. So Huzefa, floor is yours. I want you to tell, how can you simplify that piece of important piece, right? In my mind, it's an important piece, right? You implement the controls, preventive controls. How do we ensure that we can detect it on a timely basis? Huzefa?
Yeah, so Sujit, and just to carry on in terms of what the both the gentlemen said, and if you look at some of the past examples that we have had, right? People, maximum amount of attack has happened in whether you bucketize it, it comes down to these 3 or 4 things. One is vulnerabilities, right? Vulnerabilities and patch system or existing systems being used. Log4j is a classic example of how it came to that. The second aspect is the supply chain, right? We all know what happened from a SolarWind perspective. The Russian UPT group took responsibility, but in this cloud native world, there is another group called Team TNT. Very interesting. They are kind of going and hacking or sort of diluting the Docker images from in GitHub. All right. So supply chain is the reality. Misconfiguration is another reality that we all faced in this VUCA world. Now the reason I'm saying all of this is, to come back to your question, is it's not a question of if I will get attacked. It's a question of when I will get attacked. And that's what Parakum mentioned, right? How do you move away from that preventive posture to the detection and response perspective? Now, the hard fact is when you get into a detect and response sort of framework and architecture, it's humanly not possible to go and try and do all of this stuff. With whatever tools and mechanism that you have, whatever products that you have in place, what it ends up doing is all those solutions and products are throwing in more and more and more alerts, billions of alerts in a day. And then a SIM does a good job of collecting those alerts, and then what, right? And that's where the ball drops. So I think from a framework perspective, AI ML 100% right there, not in terms of only detecting and responding to attack, but also when I say respond, ensuring that you have enough automation built in to ensure that all of these billions and billions of alerts are kind of handled in a specific way. All the weak chaff is taken aside and we concentrate on the most pressing ones. And machine helps us do that. So that the humans are left with only few set of very, very critical threats to kind of work on. So modernization of your SOC is a huge thing which comes into play, specifically when you're getting into a detect and response sort of framework.
Right. So I think that in itself, for me, we need to have a different discussion. Modernization of the SOC and how do we simplify using ML, AI, and automation. Right. So, Huzefa, there are a few questions which we have received from the participants. Right. And there's one question Peter is asking us: are there templates, guidelines, and to support the zero trust? Para, do you want to just give any insight on that?
Yeah,
quickly, very briefly.
I think yes. I think excellent question, Peter, because on one hand we are saying that needs to be a zero trust framework, and we have to ensure that each of these entities are sort of not implicitly trusted between the transaction. But how do we go about doing it and set guideline? I'll tell you from a Palo Alto perspective, because that's the nearest I can connect this. For example, we have these next-gen firewall. And what it ends up doing from a network security perspective is exactly this, right? How do I ensure that I get into some of these zero trust decisions between the user, between the application and the device and the content? Just keeping a network firewall and allowing and opening a few ports at the L3 level is not good enough. How do I ensure that I get into layer 7, which is the user? I identify the user is accessing which kind of application, and within the application, what is it that is trying to get into granular control, and from which devices. So in Palo Alto, we have this concept of user ID, application ID, device ID. You can create policies with these entities, and there is a beautiful thing called as a policy optimizer. The reason I'm putting this out is exactly does what you said, right? It kind of studies these entities and gives you examples and suggestions in your environment of what should be that zero trust policy be for this set of users accessing this set of application from this set of devices. So you're absolutely, there are templates and there are ways. And now coming back to your point, Sujit, now how can we do this? How can a policy optimizer watch everything and suggest? The only answer is AIML, right? Again, we rely on studying the patterns, figuring it out, and then kind of coming up with the suggestions and guidelines. I hope I answered you, Peter.
Peter, if you do have any further questions or comments, please, send us those emails or whatever. You can catch us on LinkedIn or Facebook, and we'll be more than happy to help. Right, so that's one. So there's one question from Hasita. I would like Arjuna to answer this question, right? How will users react to zero trust? Is it very rigid, or do you need to be flexible?
There should be one person to take a blame, right? Actually, it's very difficult. It's time to time. We had the cases very recently, but sometime actually we are in the starting stage of the zero trust, and that it's a level of maturity, right? Then the answer is different. But I think we have to educate them if you are giving any exception, right? And this is the risk. And then your risk versus whatever your requirement, we have to assess and take a call. Businesses, yes, definitely we have to allow something restricted, but then they should aware, even their superiors and everyone should aware, if you allow this one, if you give the exception, this is the way. But as it says, it's a very black and white, right? Zero trust is very much black and white. And then we have to take a call time to time, level of maturity. And whatever we are doing, but the risk, they should take they should aware what is the risk they are going to take because of that, whatever the exception they requested. Sujit, we can't hear you.
Asita, I think your questions were partially answered by Huzefa, and the other part was answered by Arjuna. If you still do have questions, you can send the questions to me and I will reach out to these gentlemen and get those answers for you. All right. Okay. We do have one question from Mukim. I'll ask Parakum to answer this question. Then, what do you think is the main challenge to build a zero trust strategy? Is it qualified vendors, resources, or lack of awareness by business?
Sujit, my perspective is like any other project, getting buy-in and awareness is the most important thing. So I believe there are, as we earlier said, there are no single solutions. It's not a single solution, but you may end up with different solutions, different vendors and all that. But it's very important that you get buy-in. I mean, Arjuna came up with this, that's really an eye-opening thing, like the use of the word zero trust, right? So something that I have seen that we used in, I have not really seen this used very much in security, but in fintech, Sujit, we use something called storytelling in development also. So there, what we do is we try to give the user the message. I mean, a punch message with a punch, like. So the best example I can tell you, like this morning I saw in one country, they are basically telling the people the impact of sea level rising, right? I can't remember the country, but I'll share the article here. So what they have done, they have put benches in the public places. Now, generally, the height of a bench is 36 inches, right? Or rather, it's low, maybe 1 feet, 1.5 feet. But this particular bench, it's about 4 feet. So people go and they'll be like, okay, why this bench is 4 feet high? How am I going to sit? Then there's a notice, right? This was in Copenhagen. So, okay, you go and see it and then you read it. Okay, they're trying to show us about this sea level rising or this global this natural disaster. So I believe, like again, but what Arjuna said now, this trust and all that. Now, say for example, even Sri Lanka, we have certain places, right, where people don't sleep. If you have been to this, there's a shrine in Kabilitta, right, bit out from Yala. So you have very valuable ornaments, but nobody takes it, right? Believes. So I believe, like if we were to run a very successful zero trust project, senior management buy-in is a key, right? And you need to do a lot of awareness, like, okay, this even the word zero trust, it never came to my mind, like it may give somebody the impression we don't trust you. So you need to address all that. And then again, probably time to time, you may need to go and again update your shareholders on what's the value, right? Or maybe certain matrices, and you again have to keep on selling this to your end users, shareholders, and everyone, so that people will really take it up and run it.
Absolutely, Parakum. Thank you for those thoughts. And I think we are completely out of time. And before we wrap up, right, and I want to thank all the audience for sharing, asking all those good questions. I would like to ask Arjuna your closing thoughts before we wrap up, and then we go to Parakum and then to Huzefa.
I think it's a good, Sujit, you invite us and we have give some sort of, because we are in the process to adapting zero trust, in others can learn, and if there's anything, any support, we can share our experiences in the different countries, different territories we are operating, and then how we adapt. It's a journey, actually. One thing is a journey, don't rush it. If you have an end target, you can keep, but I think don't rush it. If you can run like a ERP implementation, its adaptation will succeed.
Absolutely. Don't run, pace it out. It's a journey. You've got to go a long way. You can't go alone, but you've got to go with everyone. Right? Thank you for those thoughts, Arjuna. Your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much on the same line. So it's a journey, plan well ahead, and make sure that you get buy-in and people are aware what you're doing and what's in it for them.
Right. So what's in it for them in the journey, right? So I guess that's where we started as well, right? Well, it can be a buzzword, but first determine what's in it for you as an organization. Huzefa, your thoughts, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to take off from both these gentlemen said. It's a journey, and the journey, if I have to put a milestone to it or look at some framework, I would say look at the journey from 3 domains and 4 pillars perspective. The 3 domains are zero trust for users, zero trust for application, zero trust for infrastructure. And across all 3 domains, look at 4 pillars. Look at the identity of the user, application, or infrastructure. Look at the device or workload on which it resides. Look at the access, enforce the least privileged access for all 3. And look at the transactions that it does, whether it is malicious, not malicious, right? So I would say 3 domains, 4 pillars, That's what we believe in, and then you can start putting your existing sort of thing. And Palo Alto, Palo Alto, Palo Alto Networks have the platform to kind of walk you through this entire 3-domain, 4-pillar strategy and work closely. And finally, I would say it's an oxymoronic statement, but trust us with your zero trust.
Absolutely. I like that punch, right? Oxymoronic statement, trust us, right? Definitely. I think people should take on what Huzefa said, right? It has been a very enlightening session for me personally. I learned a few things, which I probably would want to go back and use it in my engagements, in my own organizations, plus wherever I'm consulting, right? So we are in the midst of a massive paradigm shift in security deployment, and one that goes beyond defense in depth is zero trust, right? Zero trust builds on the concepts of don't trust anyone. What we mean is least privilege. Divide and conquer, network segmentation. And who are you, where are you, and what are you accessing is risk-based access. And where is your perimeter? Your perimeter is going to be the identity, that's users. And it can only strengthen the network, application, workloads, and data protection. But before I let you all go, I want to share a problem with you. Just imagine if you were called upon to implement zero trust for an airline company and the user is a pilot. I imagine he's going to go through multiple gates. He's going to be in multiple countries at multiple different time zones. How would you ensure that he has an excellent user experience? And when you have the answer, please drop in a message to me on LinkedIn, or you can directly mail me. And with that note, I'd like to thank all of you for taking your time and sharing your valuable experience. And I enjoyed it, and I'm sure it has been enlightening for all the participants here. Look forward to seeing you in another session.